The sun cast a golden glow over the quiet cul-de-sac, where neatly trimmed lawns and pristine white fences lined the streets. It was the kind of neighborhood that looked perfect from the outside. Safe, orderly, the embodiment of suburban bliss. For Travis Holt, it had been home for the past 5 years, a place where he found solace after years of moving from city to city. But to Travis, this wasn't just a neighborhood. It was where he shared his life with his loyal German shepherd, Ranger. Ranger wasn't just a pet. He was family. A towering yet gentle presence, he had been by Travis's side through thick and thin, offering unwavering companionship. Whether it was a morning jog or a quiet evening on the porch, Ranger was always there, his ears twitching at every unfamiliar sound, his deep brown eyes watching over his owner like a silent protector. Travis had never had trouble in the neighborhood before. His neighbors were friendly enough. Some exchanged pleasantries, others simply nodded in passing. It was a place where people kept to themselves, where rules were followed, and where the Homeowners Association, HOA, made sure of it. The HOA had always been a presence in the community, an invisible force that dictated how high the grass could grow, what color mailboxes were acceptable, and even how long holiday decorations could stay up. Travis never had a reason to care much about their rules. Until now. As he sat on his porch, sipping coffee, he watched as a black SUV with tinted windows slowly rolled past his house, moving at a crawl before finally stopping near his driveway. A sharp-dressed woman in her 50s, Diane Holloway, stepped out, clutching a leather-bound notebook. She was the head of the HOA, known for her rigid enforcement of the rules. Her expression, always unreadable, was especially unsettling today. Travis felt Ranger stiffen beside him, his ears perking up. The dog didn't growl, but his posture tensed, sensing something was off. Travis didn't know it yet, but this would be the first sign of trouble, the first crack in the illusion of his peaceful neighborhood. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. Travis spotted the envelope the moment he stepped outside. It was wedged between the slats of his mailbox, crisp and official-looking, with the unmistakable HOA logo stamped in the top corner. Something about it felt off. He tore it open, his eyes scanning the words, and with each line, his stomach twisted tighter. Dear Mr. Travis Holt, it has come to our attention that your dog, a German Shepherd, is in violation of the HOA's pet policy. Due to breed restrictions outlined in Section 14B, we must request that you remove the animal from the premises within 7 days to remain in compliance with community guidelines. Failure to comply will result in fines and potential legal action. Travis read it again, and then again. His grip tightened on the letter. Breed restrictions? He had lived here for years, and there had never been any mention of restrictions on dogs. Ranger had never caused trouble, not once. So why now? A sharp bark from the backyard snapped him back to the present. Ranger, oblivious to the turmoil in his owner's mind, stood at the fence, watching a squirrel skitter up a tree. Travis exhaled slowly. This had to be a mistake. He marched inside, booted up his laptop, and pulled up the HOA's rulebook. He had a copy from when he bought the house, stored neatly in his email. Scrolling through page after page, he found nothing about restricted breeds, no mention of German Shepherds, no Section 14B. His pulse quickened. They were making this up. The next morning, Travis walked straight to the HOA office. The letter clenched in his fist. The small brick building sat at the edge of the community park, a place most people only visited when they had to. Inside, the air was sterile, the silence thick. Behind the front desk sat a young woman in a pressed blazer, her expression neutral, as she typed away on her computer. Travis slid the letter onto the counter. I need to speak with someone about this. She barely glanced at it before giving him a tight smile. That would be Ms. Holloway. She's in a meeting. Then I'll wait. 15 minutes later, Diane Holloway emerged from the back, her silver hair perfectly in place, her sharp eyes unreadable. Mr. Travis Holt, she greeted, as if they were old acquaintances. "What can I do for you?" Travis held up the letter. "You can explain this, because there's nothing in the HOA rules about restricted breeds." Diane took the paper, scanning it with a look of mock surprise. "Oh dear," she murmured. "I see how this could be unexpected." She handed it back to him with a practiced smile. "But I assure you, the rule is in place to protect the community." "From what? A dog that's lived here for years with zero problems?" Her expression didn't waver. "Rules evolve, Mr. Travis Holt. We have to adapt for the safety of all residents." Travis stared at her, searching for a crack in her polished demeanor. "This isn't about safety. It's personal, isn't it?" Diane's smile faltered, just for a second. A flicker of something cold passed through her gaze before she straightened her posture. "You have 7 days," she said simply. Then, turning on her heel, she disappeared back into her office. Travis stood there, his jaw tight, his fists clenched at his sides. He knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about a dog. This was war. Travis Holt had never been the kind of man to let things slide. The moment he stepped back into his house, he tossed the HOA letter onto the kitchen counter and grabbed his laptop. Something didn't add up, and he was about to find out what. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he searched through community records, legal filings, and HOA documents. If there really was a new rule, it had to be documented, somewhere. But the more he searched, the more bizarre things became. The HOA's official website had no mention of restricted dog breeds, no amendments, no recent meetings where such a rule had been passed. Yet the letter claimed it was in effect. So where did it come from? Then Travis dug into the HOA board members. Diane Holloway had been president for nearly 8 years, and in that time the rules had steadily grown more suffocating. She had fined homeowners for leaving trash cans visible for more than 20 minutes, forced a neighbor to paint their house twice in 1 year, and even threatened to evict an elderly widow for having an unapproved garden trellis. But one detail stood out the most. Diane hated dogs. Travis found an old neighborhood forum post from years ago. A resident had complained about Diane calling animal control on their dog, a dog that had done nothing wrong. Another neighbor mentioned that she had once tried to get a rule passed banning all large breeds, but failed when too many homeowners protested. Travis leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. This wasn't about rules. This was about control. But why now? That's when he remembered something. 2 weeks ago. It had been a normal evening, just after sundown. Travis had been walking Ranger through the neighborhood, the leash loose in his grip as they strolled past Holloway's house. The massive, pristine home sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, its manicured hedges lined up like soldiers. Ranger, being curious as always, had sniffed near the edge of her lawn. Nothing more, just a sniff. But then, the front door had burst open. Diane had stormed onto the porch, her face twisted in disgust. "Get your mud away from my property!" she had snapped, her voice carrying across the quiet street. Travis had stared at her, stunned. Ranger hadn't even stepped onto her yard. "He's on the sidewalk," Travis had replied, keeping his voice calm but firm. Diane's lips had curled. "That dog is dangerous," she spat. "I've seen what those kinds of animals do." Travis had felt his blood pressure spike. "Those kinds?" She didn't answer. She just turned on her heel and slammed the door. And now, 2 weeks later, this letter. Travis's jaw clenched. She wanted Ranger gone. And since she couldn't use real rules to make it happen, she was fabricating them. But that wasn't even the worst part. As Travis continued his digging, he stumbled across something that made his stomach drop. A recent HOA disciplinary report. It was a list of homeowners who had been fined, cited, or disciplined for breaking HOA rules in the past year. Most were small violations: improperly parked cars, unsanctioned garden decorations, minor infractions. But then Travis saw a specific name, highlighted in red: Michael Holloway. Travis frowned. Holloway? He clicked on the report, opening the details. Michael Holloway was Diane's adult son, and he had been fined and nearly evicted 6 months ago after an aggressive dog attack. Travis's stomach twisted. Could it be? He scrolled. Further. The report didn't specify details about the attack, just that Michael had been found responsible and that the case had been settled privately. But Travis had a gut feeling that this was deeply personal for Diane. She wasn't just trying to get rid of Ranger for the sake of HOA rules. She was punishing Travis for something her son had done. Travis exhaled sharply, his mind racing. Diane. Holloway wasn't just some overzealous HOA president. She was dangerous, and if she thought Travis was going to back down, she was dead wrong. The first fine arrived the next morning. Travis found it taped to his front door. A bright red notice, stamped with the bold words, "Violation warning, infraction, unauthorized pet presence, fine, $250, due immediately." Travis stared at the paper, his jaw tightening. Unauthorized pet? Ranger had lived here for years without issue, yet overnight the dog was now a problem? This wasn't just some HOA policy. This was a calculated attack. With a deep breath, he tore the notice down and marched inside. But before he could even process his next move, his phone buzzed. An email from the HOA. Subject: Urgent. Compliance required, Mr. Travis Holt. Due to your failure to comply with our pet policies, additional penalties may be enforced, including possible legal action. We strongly urge you to resolve this matter before it escalates further. Travis exhaled sharply, his fingers curling into a fist around the fine notice. They weren't just playing by their own made-up rules anymore. They were trying to intimidate him. By the end of the week, the harassment had escalated. Travis walked out one morning to find his trash. Cans knocked over, garbage spilling onto the pavement. He frowned. He always secured them tightly. At first, he assumed it was raccoons, until he noticed something odd, a neatly printed HOA citation tucked under one of the bins. Violation: improper waste disposal. $100, fine. Travis's pulse pounded in his ears. They were setting him up. Later that evening, as he took Ranger for a walk, he noticed something else. The way his neighbors looked at him. Some averted their gaze, others whispered behind their hands. A few, the ones who had always been friendly, gave him apologetic looks, as if they wanted to say something but were too afraid. It wasn't long before he understood why. 2 days later, his neighbor Brian, a guy he had known for years, pulled him aside as he was getting his mail. "Travis," he said hesitantly, glancing around as if someone might be listening. "I don't know what's going on between you and the HOA, but they're telling people you have a dangerous dog." Travis stiffened. "What?" Brian shifted uncomfortably. "They sent out an email blast saying your dog is aggressive, that he's a liability to the neighborhood." Travis's blood ran cold. "That's a lie." "I know," Brian said quickly, "but not everyone does. Diane's got people scared. Some are siding with her. Others don't want to get involved." He sighed. "Just watch your back." Travis clenched his jaw. Diane was spreading lies, trying to turn the community against him. But why? Was it just about Ranger, or was she trying to break him entirely? He wasn't about to let that happen. Travis refused to back down. He documented everything, every fine, every notice, every interaction. He installed security cameras on his property, making sure there was no way they could accuse him of anything without proof. But the HOA wasn't done. One evening, as Travis pulled into his driveway, he noticed a tow truck idling near his house. His gut twisted as he stepped out of the car. A man in an HOA uniform approached him with a clipboard. "Mr. Travis Holt," the man said, voice flat. "Your vehicle has been cited for unauthorized street parking." Travis's patience snapped. "That's my driveway." The man didn't even flinch. "The front of your vehicle extended 2 inches over the sidewalk. That's a violation." He gestured to the tow truck. "We've been authorized to remove it." Travis took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "Move that truck, or you're trespassing on my property." The man hesitated, just long enough for Travis to pull out his phone and begin recording. "Smile," Travis said coldly, "because this is going online." A tense silence followed. The man muttered something into his radio, then waved the tow truck off. Without another word, they left. Travis knew now, this wasn't just about Ranger. They wanted him gone. But they had just made a mistake. They underestimated who they were messing with. Travis Holt had never felt true panic before. Not like this. One moment, Ranger was there, stretched out lazily on the back porch, soaking in the warm afternoon sun. The next, he was gone. Travis's heart pounded as he scanned the backyard, calling out his name. "Ranger!" His voice echoed off the wooden fence, met with nothing but silence. It didn't make sense. The gate was locked. Ranger never wandered. Travis knew his dog, knew his habits, knew that even if the gate had somehow been left open, Ranger wouldn't just take off. Something was wrong. Travis's stomach clenched. He sprinted through the house, checking every room, as if somehow Ranger had let himself inside without Travis noticing. Nothing. He rushed out the front door, eyes darting up and down the street. Nowhere. The neighborhood was eerily quiet. A few cars lined the driveways, but no one was outside, not even the usual dog walkers. Travis's pulse thundered in his ears as he grabbed his phone and scrolled to the security camera app. He rewound the footage from the backyard. At 2:37 p.m., Ranger had been there, curled up near the porch. At 2:42 p.m., he was gone. Travis zoomed in. A shadow flickered at the corner of the frame. Just a sliver of movement near the fence line. Someone had been there. Someone had taken him. His grip tightened around his phone as a dark realization settled in his chest. The HOA. Travis didn't waste a second. He grabbed his keys and drove straight to the HOA office. The moment he stepped inside, Diane Holloway looked up from her desk, her face a mask of practiced neutrality. "Mr. Travis Holt," she said smoothly, folding her hands together. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Travis threw the fine notices onto her desk. "Where is my dog?" Diane blinked, feigning confusion. "Excuse me?" "Don't play dumb with me. He was in my yard less than an hour ago. Now he's gone." Travis leaned forward, his voice dangerously low. "Your people have been harassing me for weeks. You think I don't know what this is? Where is Ranger?" Diane tilted her head. "Mr. Travis Holt, if your animal is missing, perhaps you should check with animal control." Travis narrowed his eyes. "You did this." Her expression remained unreadable. "I assure you, the HOA has no involvement in this unfortunate situation." Travis's fists clenched at his sides. She was lying. He could see it in the slight twitch of her mouth, the way her fingers tapped the desk in perfect rhythm. She was enjoying this, but without proof she had the upper hand. Now Travis spent the next 4 hours searching. He combed the streets, knocking on doors, showing pictures of Ranger to every neighbor who would answer. Some shook their heads, others hesitated before giving nervous glances toward the HOA office. Travis felt the weight of their silence. They were scared. He called every shelter, every vet clinic, every animal control office in the county. No one had reported picking up a German Shepherd that day. Panic clawed at his throat. What if? No. He refused to think like that. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Travis parked his truck and gripped the steering wheel, his breathing ragged. His best friend was out there, somewhere, and he wasn't stopping until he found him. Then, his phone rang. An unknown number. Travis answered immediately. "Hello?" A pause. Then a voice, low, urgent. "They took him." Travis's blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" I can't say, but I saw it happen." The caller hesitated, then whispered, "They took him to the old maintenance shed behind the community park." Travis didn't ask any more questions. He threw the truck into gear and floored it. The park was deserted when Travis arrived, the only sound the distant chirping of crickets. His headlights cast eerie shadows as he pulled up near the old maintenance shed, a rundown structure the HOA had long abandoned. Travis climbed out, his heart pounding. He reached for the flashlight in his glove compartment and made his way toward the door. It was padlocked, but inside he heard it. A faint whimper. Travis's chest tightened. "Ranger?" Another whimper. Then scratching. Desperate. Frantic. Travis didn't think. He stepped back and kicked. Once, twice, until the lock snapped and the door swung open. And there, in the dim glow of his flashlight, was Ranger. A thick chain was wrapped around his collar, tethering him to a support beam. His ears flattened as he saw Travis, his tail wagging weakly. Relief flooded Travis's body as he rushed forward, kneeling beside his dog. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, his hands shaking as he unlatched the chain. "I got you," Ranger pressed. Against him, trembling, Travis's relief quickly turned to fury. Whoever did this hadn't just wanted to scare him. They had locked his dog up like a prisoner. Travis stood, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. Diane Holloway had made a mistake. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was war. Travis Holt had never been a man to throw his weight around. He had always believed in handling things the right way, through patience, logic, and reason, but the HOA had crossed the line. They had kidnapped his dog. As Ranger lay curled up in the passenger seat of his truck, his tail thumping weakly against the worn leather, Travis knew one thing. This wasn't over. Diane Holloway and her corrupt HOA thought they had control. They thought their phony fines and intimidation tactics made them untouchable. What they didn't know, what they had never bothered to ask, was who they were messing with. Travis pulled into his driveway and reached into the glove compartment. Beneath a few old receipts and spare change, his fingers brushed against cold, polished metal. He pulled it out, turning it over in his palm. A sheriff's badge. The next morning, Travis didn't wait for an invitation. He stormed into the HOA office, his boots thudding against the tile floor. The receptionist looked up, startled, but before she could stop him, he pushed straight past her and into Diane Holloway's office. Diane sat behind her oversized desk, poised as always, but when she saw Travis, her expression flickered. Just for a second. Annoyance. Maybe even fear. "Mr. Travis Holt," she said coolly, folding her hands, "barging into my office isn't going to help your situation." Travis didn't sit. He didn't blink. He simply reached into his Travisette and placed the badge on her desk. The room went silent. Diane's eyes flicked down, and for the first time since this war began, Travis saw something real cross her face. Shock, disbelief, maybe even panic. "I served as a deputy sheriff for 10 years, Travis said, his voice low and steady. "I know the law, Diane, and I know when someone is abusing their power." Diane recovered quickly, forcing a smile. "Travis, I don't see how—" "Save it." Travis leaned forward, pressing his palms against her desk. "You sent your people to steal my dog. You locked him up in an abandoned maintenance shed like a piece of garbage. That's not just an HOA violation." His voice dropped. "That's a crime." Diane's lips parted, but no words came out. Travis pulled a folder from his Travisette and tossed it onto her desk. Inside were copies of every fine, every fraudulent notice, every fabricated rule change. He had documented everything. "You think you're untouchable," Travis continued. "That you can harass people, manipulate them, make them afraid." He tilted his head slightly. "But here's the problem, Diane. You don't scare me." A muscle in her jaw twitched. "Mr. Travis Holt," she said carefully, her voice tight, "I think you're making baseless accusations. I would never—" Travis cut her off with one final move. He pulled out his phone and hit play. A distorted, nervous voice filled the IE room. The anonymous caller who had tipped him off the night before. They took him. They locked him in the shed behind the park. "I saw it happen." Diane's face drained of color. Travis let the recording play in full before tucking the phone back into his pocket. "Now, here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice calm but deadly. "You're going to drop every fine, every fake violation, every fabricated rule you've been using to harass me." Diane didn't speak. "And," Travis added, "you're going to resign." Diane's hands curled into fists on the desk. "You can't force me to—" Travis smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "Oh, I think I can." He tapped his badge. "Because if you don't, I'll make sure this entire HOA faces an official investigation." Heike straightened, grabbing his badge from the desk and tucking it back into his pocket. "You have until the end of the day." Then, without waiting for her response, he turned and walked out. By the time Travis reached home, the emails had already started. A message from the HOA. "Dear Mr. Travis Holt, after careful review, the HOA has decided to dismiss all pending violations against your property. Additionally, in light of recent events, Ms. Diane Holloway has chosen to step down from her position as HOA president. Travis exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. It was over. He turned to Ranger, who was sprawled out on the couch, chewing lazily on a tennis ball. "Looks like we won, buddy." Ranger thumped his tail against the cushion, completely unfazed. Travis let out a quiet laugh. Maybe, just maybe, things could finally go back to normal. But one thing was certain. No one would ever mess with him or his dog again. The downfall of Diane Holloway should have been the end of it. But Travis Holt had spent enough years in law enforcement to know that corruption rarely worked alone. Something still wasn't right. Even after Diane's resignation, Travis had an uneasy feeling gnawing at the back of his mind. There were still too many unanswered questions. Who had physically taken Ranger? Who was the anonymous caller? And most importantly, why? Travis wasn't done digging. The next morning, Travis took a drive to City Hall, where HOA records were publicly accessible. He spent hours combing through files, cross-referencing every board member who had served under Diane. That's when he found it. A pattern. Nearly every contested HOA fine over the past 3 years had been overturned in small claims court, not because of technicalities, but because the evidence provided by the HOA had been fabricated, and one name appeared on nearly every fraudulent case. Douglas Reeves. Travis recognized him. Diane's second-in-command, the HOA's treasurer, a man who had remained eerily quiet throughout the entire ordeal. Travis's gut twisted. Diane wasn't the mastermind. She was just the enforcer. Douglas was the real villain. Travis wasted no time. That evening, he waited in the parking lot outside the HOA office, knowing Douglas would have to clean up whatever mess Diane left behind. Sure enough, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Douglas stepped outside, locking the door behind him. Travis moved fast, intercepting him before he could get to his car. "We need to talk." Douglas froze, but quickly composed himself. "Mr. Travis Holt," he said, forcing a polite smile. "What can I do for you?" Travis didn't waste time. "I know you were behind it." Douglas stiffened. "Behind what?" Travis pulled out a stack of papers, copies of the fraudulent HOA fines, the fake violations, the staged harassment. You were running a racket, weren't you? Extorting homeowners, making them pay off bogus fines so you and Diane could pocket the money. Douglas's face twitched, but he kept his voice calm. "That's a serious accusation." Travis took a step closer. "And then you went too far. You thought you could send a message by stealing my dog." His voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "You picked the wrong guy." For the first time, Douglas looked genuinely afraid. His hand gripped his car keys so tightly his knuckles turned white. Then he broke. "All right, fine," he hissed, glancing around nervously. "Diane wanted you out. She was losing control, and you weren't bending like the others." His breathing quickened. I didn't take the dog myself, okay? I told one of the HOA enforcers to handle the situation." Travis's blood boiled. "You ordered it," Travis said coldly. "That makes you just as guilty." Douglas swallowed hard, then did something Travis didn't expect. He ran. Travis didn't even hesitate. He tackled Douglas to the pavement. Within moments, Douglas was on his stomach, wrists pinned behind his back. Travis reached for his phone, dialing an old friend from the sheriff's office. "Yeah," Travis said, breath steady. "I've got a confession. You're going to want to hear this." Justice was finally being served. The fall of Diane Holloway had been the first domino. But when Douglas Reeves was arrested, the entire HOA empire collapsed. News spread fast. Homeowners who had once lived in fear of the HOA's iron grip began coming forward with their own stories: unjust fines, fabricated violations, intimidation tactics. With every testimony, the case against the corrupt board grew stronger. By the end of the week, the remaining board members resigned. Some out of guilt, others because they knew the law was coming for them next. A special homeowners meeting was held, one unlike any before. This time, real voices were heard. With Diane and Douglas gone, the community elected new leadership, people who actually cared about the neighborhood, not just about power and control. Travis stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching it all unfold. He hadn't fought this war for recognition. He had done it for Ranger, for his home, for every person who had been too afraid to fight back. As the meeting ended, a few neighbors approached him, shaking his hand, thanking him. Even the ones who had once sided with Diane now saw the truth. Travis simply nodded, his eyes drifting to the open door, where Ranger sat waiting, tail wagging. As he walked out into the fresh evening air, he gave Ranger a pat on the head and murmured, "Looks like we got our neighborhood back, buddy." Ranger barked in agreement. For the first time in weeks, Travis felt peace, and this time, no one would take it away. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next part, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated. See you in the next one. Your support means the world.